A concussion is a traumatic brain injury that alters the way the brain functions. Some concussions can be very minor, and others can be very serious and result in a coma or even death. Throughout my life, I have suffered 5 concussions. My first concussion was when I was in the 3rd grade, and I hit another kid's head with my head at recess. My most recent concussion was last year during wrestling when I got hit in the head with a board, and I had to sit out for wrestling for a week. Now, in Jeffrey Kluger's article, Health Special Kids and Concussions in Times Magazine, he reported the physics of concussion, which are when the head stops but the brain doesn't and slams into the front of the skull and then bounces back and slams into the back of the skull. In Melissa Healy's LA Times article, Anatomy of a Concussion, she reports the anatomies of the concussion, which is the hard part to understand. The interlocking tissues in the brain, when the brain compresses, get stretched and torn, and that is where the cells thrive, and those cells will release chemicals that make their neighboring cells release more chemicals, and that'll cause chaotic disruption. Now I will tell you about the types of concussions, the symptoms of concussions, and how to prevent concussions. A simple concussion is just when there's the swelling of the brain, axonal damage, and metabolic disruption. There are 3 types of grades of a simple concussion, ranging from the 1st grade, where there will be no loss of consciousness and symptoms lasting up to 15 minutes, and the 3rd grade is when there is a loss of consciousness and symptoms will last more than an hour. A more serious type of concussion is the hematoma concussion, where there is damaged blood vessels and blood will pool above or below the dura, which is the toughest, most outer membrane of the brain. Now for the most serious type of concussion is the skull fracture, where shards of the skull can actually be embedded in the brain. This is the most serious type, but the most uncommon type, but it still can happen. Now for the symptoms of a concussion. There are 4 categories the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports: thinking, physical, emotional, and sleep. Having difficulty remembering stuff in the past or learning new things or difficulty concentrating all falls into the category of thinking. Nausea, blurry vision, balance and coordination problems all headaches fall under the physical category. Emotional is when someone is way too emotional and more emotional than usual. In the sleep category, it is when someone is not able to fall asleep, sleeps way too much, or doesn't sleep enough. Post-concussion syndrome is when symptoms of concussion last for more than they usually do, such as they could last up to a year, the Minnesota Epilepsy Group reports. Post-concussion syndrome is when symptoms last up to a year, and those symptoms are mostly headaches and confusions. Now for the prevention of concussions. Robert Cantu, in his article Preventing Sports Concussions Among Children, and the New York Times reports that in 4 sports they could change things to reduce the amount of concussions. 90% of soccer concussions happen from heading the ball, so if they make that illegal for kids under the age of 14, they could reduce the amount of concussions. Body checking in hockey should be illegal until the age of 14, and baseball and softball should make sliding headfirst illegal. And other things besides sports, such as your house, making lighting throughout in dark areas so people don't fall over things, or clean up cluttered areas so people don't trip over things, could help. Always wear a helmet when you ride bikes or skateboards or horses. Don't drink and drive, and always wear your seatbelt in case you get in an accident. Concussions are something that are very serious and nothing to mess with. If you know somebody that has a concussion, take them to the doctor. Or if someone seems like they have symptoms of concussion, make sure they go see a doctor. So be careful with all of your heads.